are looking pretty decent in season.
Well, I think the main reason that you are seeing some success with our products, Mike, is because we're a service company, as you know, and so all of our products are founded on the need to perform. I mean, we make them for ourselves just like we make them for everybody else. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm really glad to hear your feedback, and I'm very glad that they are helping to turn around the lawn, in one season. Um, there's, as you know from past discussions, that the products are designed to both provide aesthetic turnaround, where things are looking better as quickly as possible, to the eye, eye of the beholder, so to
Well,
speak.
yeah,
But
which is important in this business.
well, it is important. That's exactly right. I mean, we can talk about all the feel good stuff of building soil biology and chemistry and aerating soil, but if we don't deliver the aesthetic qualities, you're going to lose the customer inside of a year and a half, and then they're not coming back, and you're not going to buy product again. You're going to get rid of us. And so thankfully you gave us a shot. What was it, a couple of years ago now? 3, 4 years
Yeah,
ago? Okay.
last year was the first that I actually used you ever very extensively.
Yeah, I remember you kicked it around for a year or so, and but then yeah, so I'm glad you gave us a shot, and hopefully the product will keep working for you. I mean, we're trying to do the best we can to make good product,
Mm. I'm
and
still I'm still needing to use some herbicide.
well, I mean,
Um,
yeah,
but
I,
then I'm really in it the first year too, so I'm not really critical about that.
well, it's not just that. I mean, you have to think for a minute. When do you see the highest amount of weed activity? You see it with as you and I have discussed in the past, with a lawn that is not super strong. So if you've got a lot of blue and ryegrass, you're going to start stressing in the summer, and you're
Mm-hmm.
going to get weed competition in the summer. But the other side of the coin is this, Mike. When you have a good number of weeds, it is highly likely that you have what we refer to as a bacterial dominant soil. The more you have a fungal dominant soil, the fewer weeds you will have. As a
Mm-hmm.
as a matter of a quick analogy, if you go into a forest and you look on the forest floor,
Mm-hmm.
generally you see a lot of leaves and a lot of sticks, but you don't see a lot of weeds. The re-
Mm-hmm.
the re-
True.
the reason for that is because all the sticks and all the leaves are digesting carbon. Lots and lots and lots of digesting carbon. And if you go beneath those leaves and sticks and you dig into the soil and you do a bioassay of that soil, you will find that that soil is more fungal dominant than the soils of all of your lawns. Okay, so
Oh, I believe that.
all right, so because of that, there's a gal who has done a lot of work, and her name's Elaine Ingham, and she's done a lot of work on this and doing bioassays and checking out different types of crops and what types of biology support those types of crops and so on and so forth. And in so doing, she learned and then shared with the rest of the world that when you have a higher fungal dominance in a home lawn, you will end up with fewer weeds. I'm simplifying a lot of what she has said, but in a big way. But in short or in brief, basically, if you improve the fungal dominance, meaning, how many fungi are actively residing in your soil, and not only how many, but the type of fungal organisms and the what we call the hyphal diameter, which is the developmental stage of those fungal organisms. And if you improve these things over time, you will simply see the weed content slowly disappear. And you know the old saying, out of sight, out of mind. And so that's how it has gone in our own service contracts with regard to lawns in our service division of our companies here. It is all about A, putting the right grass in, B, feeding the soil biology the proper food substrates so that you start to slowly grow out a more fungal dominant soil, so it is selecting for fewer weeds. In other words, the higher fungal dominance by default ends up reducing the number of weeds or the weed pressure that you will have. Therefore, you will not have the need to go out and actually use the herbicides as often, or instead of a broadcast application, you're just going around with a backpack, and twice a year you might use a gallon of spray through a 10,000 square foot lawn because you're just spot treating a couple spots here and there. That's how it will go. But you've got to educate your clientele about the whole fungal dominance thing. It'll be something they've never heard before. They can go and they can search and research online if they wish and start learning about that. But the fact of the matter is that our products, as you transition your clients from the products that just give them the eye candy, help their lawns to look good during the transition, right? As you transition them, you can slowly move them to lower NPK products. And because the soil biology has started to work for you again, the lower NPK products will maintain the same aesthetic value for the client that right now maybe the 1005 is required, but down the road it might be more of the 524, you see. And the reason that will work is because you've permitted the soil biology to start working for you and for your client in their home property. And by allowing that soil biology to start working, the digestive tract of the earth, which is the soil as we know it, the digestive tract becomes biologically active again, starts extracting nutrition from the biological foods that you are putting down on the ground. And so when you use a 524 or a 303 or a finesse GVH, okay, the 303 being a carbo grow. So the lower you see our NPK numbers go, the more of the complex carbons you are getting in the product. And the more complex carbons you get, the more you are going to steer your biology toward a fungal dominant soil, and the fewer weeds that will, be in the lawn over time. So when you're using the 1005, you're making a transition that is cost effective for your clients. It's giving them the aesthetic results that they want to get. You may stay with that 1005. You may always use it or something similar to it as a early spring application to kind of wake the lawn up. But we also have a 904. And so you can slowly transition so that you're moving away from the more readily available nitrogen to the more slowly available nitrogen, or to the nitrogen that has to be derived from the product through biological degradation. And as you head toward our 524 and our Carbo Grow 303 and the Finesse GVH 000 analysis, as you head further toward those low analysis products, you are literally um, increasing the fungal foods, and you are feeding the fungal biomass in the soil, and the fungal biomass is by default selecting for fewer weeds and healthier turf.
Okay. Fascinating.
Yeah, so that's the products are actually designed for a purpose, put it that way.
I don't know that I disagree with that reasonably.
Yep.
Which the thing is still having to deal with weeds. That's more an observation. It's not really a complaint.
Oh no,
Now,
yeah.
one question I have: what's herbicide do to this? What does broadleaf herbicide do to this fungal growth and soil biology?
That's an outstanding. That's an outstanding question. It knocks it back. You're right. I heard you about to say it. It knocks it back. But as you transition from a synthetic program to a more organic and biologically driven program, you will also note that you are able to use less and less of your synthetic herbicides. You may even get to the point where you're spot treating only. Now you may have to do more spot treating in the first year of spot treating. You might be doing a half hour per site. The next year you might be doing 25 or 20 minutes per site. You see, and the reason that your time goes down during your visits each year is because you simply are having fewer weeds to treat. Now, the reason that is going down is because your transitional process with your fertility products is starting to work for you. You are changing the biology in the soil. Now, yes, when you have to go back and you have to spray with that herbicide to keep that customer happy, so that they don't run off to our favorite chemical competitor that is applying lawns 5, 6, or 7 times a year, all with chemicals. You don't want your client to run back to that, because that's just simply a loss for the environment. Okay, but if you have 5 applications a year that are organic, or even 3, whatever it is for your clientele, 3 or 5 that are organic, and then you're rolling in and you're spot treating with an herbicide once a year, or once every other year, or once every third year, eventually with some of these people, it will be. When you are doing that, look at how you've reduced the number of synthetic applications and the amount of synthetic material applied to that property.
For sure.
And what happens is, in the beginning, you're pushing the snowball up the hill. But when you get to the point that you're able to start spot treating, and that's still keeping your clients happy with a spot treating approach, you're now at the top of the hill. And the years that follow, where your spot treatments may not take you as long, you're starting to roll that snowball down the other side of the hill, and you're starting to gain momentum. And the momentum means that the biology is now growing more quickly in the direction that you want it to grow, which is toward that fungal biomass, if you use the right products that feed the fungal dominance in the soil. And so you are correct. I'm going to restate myself again. You are correct in that the weeds, when you spray, you are going to set the biology back. But if you're spot treating, now you're setting the biology back in that spot, not the whole lawn. Okay? So the sooner you can move to spot treating, the better off both your clients' properties and you will be. And so it is a time process. You're nurturing the relationship with your client. You're nurturing both your and their relationship with the environment. It is a walk of faith. I don't care what anyone says. It's knowledge, but it's also faith, because you're taking my word for it that this stuff is going to work for you the way I've said. And I've tried to be honest with you from day one, and I will continue to do that for you. And by the sounds of it, at least we're starting to see the beginnings of it working for you.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
Well, let me ask you this. Last year, I did one treatment of 1005 in the spring and about 2 treatments of 524 between late spring and mid to late summer. And then the fall, I did 1005 again. What's that sound like for a program to get this thing going as fast as possible and as cost effectively as possible?
Well, I mean, that's our program in a nutshell. That we do for our own clients. I mean, we do we do 1005 early spring, and then we do the 524 late spring. depending on the season and the temperatures and the amount of rainfall or lack thereof, we'll often do the late spring 524 application here in Lancaster, PA, Zone 6. Somewhere between mid-May and like the third week of June. It's kind of like a 5-week rotational round, if you will. And the goal is to have it done in an ample amount of time that the lawns are looking real nice, real thick, real full, colorful, tolerant of traffic, all in time for July 4th holiday. And then then we typically will start making the what we call the late summer, early fall application of 524. We typically will make that in the month of September. It gets kind of compressed, but we'll make it if we have to do any seeding, or if we have new clients coming on that want their lawns reseeded, etc. We'll be doing that at the same time. So we're interspersing from mid-August till the end of the first week of October, applications of 524 and seeding work. Most of the seeding work, as you know, because we've discussed it in the past, is done a good solid 10 days before the September full moon, and we have our crazy reasons for doing that, but I will never vary from that. I can tell you that now. That said, the 1005 fall application, we just call a mid to late fall application. And the reason we call it mid to late fall is because some of the people who needed an earlier September 524 application, we want to make sure that we get back to them in time. If that early September 524 application is starting to wane at all or peter out at all, we want to be sure that we're back by mid-fall with the 1005 to spark it back up, make sure it's aesthetically pleasing to them through Halloween and through Thanksgiving and into the beginning of winter. And then some of the properties that we may have applied in the end of September, well, then we can get to in what we refer to as late fall, because the 524 is still carrying on quite well on its own. And then the 1005 becomes more of a quote-unquote winterizer application. And in any case, that 1005, aside from a little bit of late fall polish, if you will, of color and vibrancy that you get around that Thanksgiving holiday, which that 1005 really just makes things look good around that Thanksgiving holiday. Aside from that polish, where you really see that late fall 1005 application kick in is you see it actually kick in the early spring the following year. And a lot of people don't understand that, but it does. With that very high percentage, which is unheard of in the industry throughout the U.S., of soluble humate powder in that product. It really preserves the nitrogen in that 1005, and that's what makes it a really nice metered out slow release 1005 that still has a real good bioactive responsiveness. So it's a responsive product, but it's also a responsible product environmentally with regard to the nitrogen, because the soluble humate powder, a lot of companies are starting to put in raw leonardite because they're trying to call it quote unquote humate, but humate by definition is a soluble salt of humic acid. So they're trying to ride a coattail, so to speak, and call it humate in their product, but they're actually putting in a very, very less costly raw leonardite ore, which is raw and not soluble. So it's not doing what ours is doing. We're actually putting in a soluble humate powder, which is carbon sequestering the nitrate in the 1005, which is giving you that nice metered out certified organic application.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's not unheard of in the industry to recommend a fairly heavy end treatment late in the fall. I've had that told me by my very conventional supplier years ago, or I was told that.
Yeah, and
but
you should ask. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question was, I think they basically put it that that'll keep things moving over winter, but come spring, that I understood it. There wasn't going to be much left of that slow release sulfur-coated urea, nitrogen fix that you're putting on in, say, late November, early December.
Well, so I'm not a real fan of that late November, early December application. I'd rather it be like late October, early or mid-November in this region. Yeah. In this region, now.
I can see why.
Right, exactly. But here, when you hear a conventional product salesperson telling you, sure, you can put your winterizer on in early December, ask them what the point of that product is. And they need to give you a good chemical, biological, and or physiological explanation. Not just, well, it winterizes it and makes it look good in spring. Here's what you want to know. The reason a little bit of soluble N is nice at that time of year is in the let me turn down my computer so it's not boinging in your ear. In the late fall, as you know, the grass is not growing as fast, so it has switched the use of its energy from apical dominance, which is a desire for top growth. It has literally phenologically switched its efforts to pushing its growth energy to the roots. It's just what the plant does naturally.
It's getting ready for winter.
It's getting ready for winter, and it's like a squirrel gathering and storing its nuts. So the grass does that, but the grass does that in a different way, and it's a process, as you well know, called photosynthesis. Now, when we apply fertilizer, Mike, we are not applying plant food. I get a kick every time I see a fertilizer bag or a jug that says plant food. or rose food, or begonia food, or turf food. It's a joke. It couldn't be more of a lie. Here's what it is. Fertilizer, when you and I go out and we spread quote unquote fertilizer, basically what we're spreading, and I'm going to use the analogy of a baker who bakes cakes, and that baker has an ingredient delivery truck, a vendor that it works with, and that truck comes by and drops off flour to the baker, and eggs in mass volume to the baker, and sugar, 50-pound bags of sugar, because the baker buys it in bulk, right? So the ingredient truck comes by and drops off all these ingredients. Now, you would not necessarily reach into the bag of flour and start eating the flour, correct?
Not likely.
Not likely. That flour is an ingredient that once it is mixed properly with other ingredients, it can be mixed into a batter and then baked in an oven and turned into a cake. Now, you might have a slice of that cake. And a lot of people will join you probably, because that is considered to be more of a food. Now, in the process of a plant, when you and I roll through with the spreader and a bag of fertilizer, and we apply these materials, we're like the ingredient truck delivering ingredients to the baker. They're still ingredients, and these ingredients are digested and they're utilized in the process, the baking process, if you will, that occurs in the chloroplast, known as photosynthesis. So what's actually happening is you're the ingredient delivery truck. This is not plant food that you and I are delivering. None of it is. None of it. We take it, we deliver it to the plant or to the soil. It gets taken up into the plant, moved to the chloroplast. Photosynthesis takes place with sunlight and carbon dioxide and all the ingredients we provided. It all gets mixed together, quote unquote, baked into a cake. And guess what you have left? You have photosynthate, carbohydrate, sugars. Guess what a cake is? Carbohydrate, sugars. So what a plant makes for itself as its own food is carbohydrate, sugars. What a baker makes in a cake is carbohydrate, sugars. Now we have food. Okay, so once the plant manufactures this photosynthate carbohydrate sugars, it actually will use a percentage of it, usually between 40 and 60% of it, in its daily functions, and then it will use the balance 40 or 60% in for storage in the roots. Now, if I told you, Mike, hey, Mike, in 1 week, okay, 2 Saturdays from now, okay, so that's 9 days, I'm going to come to your house with a pickup truck full of real gold bullion, and I'm going to give it to you free of charge. But you have to store it in your basement. And let's say for a moment that you have no basement. Let's say that the bullion itself is worth, just say 10 million. And my question to you is, if you have no basement, but one of the parameters of my giving you $10 million worth of gold bullion is that you will build a basement inside of 9 days. Am I correct in saying that you will probably find a way to build a basement underneath your house in a matter of 9 days?
If I was convinced you were going to show up with the gold bullion anyway.
If I signed a contractual obligation and it was ironclad and you knew it was going to happen,
Sure.
My guess is you're a pretty resourceful guy because I already know you to be a resourceful guy. My guess is you're going to contact a number of people you know, and that thing's going to be built. It might be Friday night at 12:01 a.m., but it'll be built.
Yeah, probably.
Probably, because if it costs you $100,000 to put a basement in and you make $9.9 million profit on the venture, I think you'll find a way. So so so
Exactly.
you're so you're increasing the size of your basement. Again, I like analogies because it makes things easier to understand. But you're increasing the size of your basement to store something of high value to you. In the fall, plants automatically switch from apical dominance above ground grass growth to
Mhm.
expanding their basements, i.e., their roots. So they expand their roots. Why? Just like the gold bullion, they know that they are going to be producing throughout the fall something of great value to them. And that great value product is photosynthate, carbohydrate, sugars. And they know they're going to be storing all of that very valuable stuff. So those plants, phenologically speaking, move to expansion of their cold cellar or their basement so that they have more room to store carbohydrate, sugars. This is why when you fertilize in the fall, you're fertilizing, you're applying some nitrogen, you're optimizing the plant's photosynthesis. Even though the top is not growing, that plant is still collecting sunlight. You know that plant's still green, it's still lush, it's still flexible. It's not frozen as it is in the middle of winter. It is still photosynthesizing and executing the process of photosynthesis. That is a carbohydrate sugar production process. So even though you're not mowing as much or at all sometimes in mid-November, that plant is still manufacturing its own food and it needs to store it just like people who can and put it in their cold cellars. They're, that plant's storing it in its cold cellar, and your mid or late winter, mid or late fall application of a product like our 1005 is optimizing photosynthesis so that those carbohydrate sugars can have an expanded basement or cold cellar to be stored in. And that is why when I said to you earlier in the conversation, I said to you that 1005 really shows up next spring. And the reason it does is because before a lot of other things are happening uh, in the spring that we're aware of, the plant starts pushing some of those carbohydrate, sugar, photosynthate reserves that were stored in the roots last fall. It starts pushing them up because the spring is phenologically very different from the fall.
Sure.
The spring is almost, not quite exclusively, but almost exclusively about top growth,
Sure.
not root growth. So
Mhm.
the roots are squeezing themselves dry. It's kind of when you have to shift to using your savings account. You can't just use your checking account and store into your savings account anymore. Now maybe your job is not bringing in as much income in February, and you're tapping into your savings account. That's kind of what the plants are doing in the beginning of the spring. They're not yet able to get rocking and rolling with photosynthesis, so they're initially in the very early spring, they're pulling from their savings account, which is in that basement or cold cellar from
Sure.
last fall.
Sure. That
So,
makes sense.
so that's the process, and that's why fertilizers are applied when they are. And so, now I have to tell you something because I forgot to mention it early on in the conversation, and I apologize, but I started. I've been recording conversations with other people because other people can learn, and not only that, but you can go back and reference this information if you have access to the internet. In a couple of weeks, you'll be able to literally go to our website, actually to another website that we now have called plantsoilhealth.com. And when that is finished being designed, a recording like this, if you permit me to, if you say no, then I'm just going to delete it when we're done. But if you say, yeah, Eric, my name's not on there, or my company name's not on there, or whatever, go right ahead and use it. Then you'll be able to access it, and so will others. They'll be able to learn from the conversation we just had. But it would be online, so you'd be able to access it. If you don't want that, all you do is say so now, and every trace of it will be deleted instantly. But if you're
I don't care.
all right, well, if you're okay with it, then it'll probably appear in 2-3 weeks, and it'll be online. But you asked some really good questions, and it gave an opportunity to respond to them in a way. I have a thing that kicks on when I start yapping, and I'm supposed to say something up front, but I'm not used to it yet. So I'll get used to it eventually here. I'll be like, hey, I'll say to people, hey, I'm going to be recording this call if you let me. If you don't, that's okay. Then I'll just delete it now. So I appreciate that, Mike.
That's perfectly fine.
I appreciate it. And you'll be able to access it and hear it again, which is really nice. So,
Sure.
All right. So do you have Eric's number then? So
Yep, I have Eric's number,
all right.
and I can, I'll send him a text, and we'll have a chat with him there. I just want to update my pricing and stuff, make sure it generally reflects reality for this year,
Sure.
so I can get my quotes out here.
I'm sure that he'll be able to help you with that. That's his ballywick, not mine. All right.
That sounds good.
All right, man. Listen, thank you for your time, and thank you for the opportunity to talk with you, because I think it's going to be helpful to others as well. So I appreciate it.
I'm sure.
As always.
Yeah, and thank you for your time and expertise.
You got it, man. No problem. Call anytime, as you know. All right?
Sure.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care now, Mike.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye now.